All right. Okay, so let's continue talking about this. I was just saying that you could do you could do a continuity and change over time with it, and you could also probably do a comparative essay. Oh yeah, by you could probably also do a comparative essay with it, where you compared types of production and perspectives on it. Um, so you got a couple of different angles you could take with it. Could you also do a cause and effect? Yeah, you could probably go for that too. There's a little bit more degree of flexibility here. You could argue, the effects that the effect of British colonial involvement was this increasing mechanization of the Indian cloth market. So you could argue that too. So there's a couple of different angles you could take with this one. It's a little more flexible. And I think that AP likes those that are more flexible to give you a little bit more of a chance to stretch yourselves a little bit. Okay. So let's look at these documents individually. Oh yeah, by the way, in terms of things that you could add to it if you're using the timeline, stuff from timeline on page 829 where it talks about the development of industrial production. You could talk about industrialization around the world, the fact that the British Industrial Revolution starts in the 1780s. You could plug in material on from the timeline on page 881 where it discusses the British takeover of India, starting in the 1750s, and then the Indian Mutiny and Rebellion of 1857, as well as other imperial conquests around the world. Other information you could put in would be from 983, because it deals with up to the 1930s, and it talks about the gradual disintegration of these European empires as part of World War One. From page 1037 in the book, there's discussion of early communist revolutions and founding of the Chinese Communist Party, which, they were aware of the fact that there were these revolutionary movements. There was an Indian Communist Party to go along with the Chinese Communist Party, whose goal was to create a communist state in India. And they were, of course, in competition with the Congress Party and Gandhi's people and whatnot. And from page 1089, 1089, there's discussion of the very end of it and sort of the end of empire. Probably the most important one there says 1915, Gandhi returns to India from South Africa, which is kind of important because we have a quote from Gandhi from 1931 or 32, which is 16, 17 years after his return to India from his work in South Africa. So you talk about Gandhi's time spent resisting the British through the course of the 1920s into the early 30s. So there's a fair bit of stuff in the timeline if you're just pulling from the book that you could plug into this one too. That's why the timeline is a super useful thing to have, because it allows you to both lay out the broader historical context as well as have handy chunks of specific historical evidence that you can use to back your arguments up. For instance, the Gandhi thing could go in to back up Gandhi's argument here. You could say Gandhi clearly knows what he's talking about because he spent 16 years investigating the subject, having come back to India in 1915. See how it plugs in there? Okay, so let's look at these individually. This document really doesn't have a point of view. It has a purpose, which would be to inform the authorities about the nature of cloth and yarn production in India. Probably, I would imagine that it supports the idea that machine spun stuff should be created, considering you're winding up with a lot more of it, even as it replaces. So, winding up with a lot more cloth and particularly more machine spun yarn. And obviously, this does lay out the fact that mechanization is replacing handwork over a period of about 50 years. Okay, so our next one, document 2, which is an Indian economist discussing it. Oh, we're getting to the end of our video here, so let's stop things here, and we'll have a third one in just